Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the documentary of Project 7. Today we're going to be talking about Terrell Carlton and his success so far with Project 7. We're going to be discussing things that we agree and disagree about the project, and Mr. Carlton's plans moving forward.
Hi, my name is Lola. In today's video, I'm going to be making a few disagreements about Project 7. There are some things that I disagree with, as far as the development and plans of Project 7.
Before we begin this documentary, it's important that you watch the first video that Lola created. The video is located into description of our YouTube channel. It's highly recommended that you watch that video first before watching this one. So to put everything in perspective, Terrell has dated one girl from 2016 to 2019, and the second girl that he dated was from December 1st through December 27th. So 2019 and 2024. That is Terrell's current breakup year records. Overall, I think that Mr. Carlton is a very smart person. He's a very calculated person as well. I also think that he is an excellent scientist when it comes to relationships. I think as far as his emotions, I think that's something he should work on a little bit more. But as far as Project 7 goes, he has a pretty good track record. But I want to ask you, Lola, what do you think of all of this so far?
I do agree. I do think that most of the time he does prioritize finding a relationship more instead of finding other things that make him happy. I think it as far as relationships, it has been an emotional roller coaster for him. But I do want to point out he should go out more and work on his goals, focusing on other things like his music career, and maybe possibly working on other projects instead of Project 7.
I do agree. However, I do believe he shouldn't necessarily go cold turkey on Project 7. But if we're talking about Terrell's success, I think for the most part he has that in the bag. He got his own car, and he's got his own money. He got his own job. He also has his own place, but at the same time that is a little bit more controversial than some people may think, because his brother and sister is living with him. So unfortunately, he doesn't necessarily have his own place at the moment. Even though technically speaking, he is the lease owner of the apartment that he lives at. The women that he's attracted to, unfortunately, will not see it that way. So if a relationship is something that he really wants to get into his own place, is definitely something he might want to consider at some point in the future. But just because Mr. Carlton is somewhat of a status symbol on his own, at the end of the day, it won't necessarily mean much. Especially if a woman has the exact same thing that Mr. Carlton has. She won't necessarily see Mr. Carlton as an equal.
One thing that I really wanted to bring up about Mr. Carlton is identity problems. When it comes to dating, Terrell typically has a problem being himself. He often identifies himself as Michael or Cameron, or in some cases, Sam. The one thing that I disagree with you about, what's the status thing that you had brought up before? If a woman has the same amount of status as he has, I don't think that necessarily would be a problem. Because Terrell had no problem finding T, who had almost nearly the same amount of things that he has now. T has her own money. She has her own car. At the time of recording this video, her own place.
I don't believe that T was Terrell's girlfriend. I think T was a lesson that Terrell needed to experience. So that way he can understand what true dating is. It's painful as this may sound. Terrell needed to go through this, so he can experience better relationships in the future. Because if I'm being honest with you, Lola, Terrell is not going to fall in love easily than he did the first time. If Terrell gets into a new relationship, he is going to be less emotional than he was the first time. A lot of people were probably wondering why didn't he learn that lesson with Aaliyah. The thing is with Aaliyah, it's because Aaliyah tolerated Terrell for him to be more vulnerable in that relationship. She allowed it to happen too much. She was never unattracted to Terrell, too emotionally available and needy. Aaliyah basically tolerated Terrell for just being overly nice. But when somebody like T comes along and leaves him out of the blue with no answer to why they broke up whatsoever, it typically turns a nice guy into a bad boy. That's why next time when Mr. Carlton gets into a new relationship, he is not going to be as overly emotional as he was the first time. Because the sad reality, you can only fall in love with someone once. T needed to happen so Terrell can be a better version of himself. So I ask you, Lola, what do you think?
I do kind of understand it just a little bit, but I do honestly believe that Mr. Carlton should be himself. I do agree, and I do see the possibility. Wasn't necessarily a lesson for him to be better the second time. All relationships are different, but it's really up to Mr. Carlton on how he wants to handle situations. One thing I will say is that I hope Mr. Carlton doesn't turn into a bad boy, just because the relationship with T didn't really work out too well. And I do agree that certain women will tolerate certain things as far as their attraction for a man, while I do agree that a woman doesn't really necessarily like an emotional man, because over time that can be unattractive to certain women. And I also see that certain women can also be attracted to that as well. Someone who was a man that share their emotions most of the time. But I'm not exactly sure if Terrell being emotionless will actually help him this time. I guess the truth phase is only time will tell.
Everybody that you see on screen has had at least one encounter with Mr. Carlton. None of these people except for Mr. Carlton is aware that they're all a part of this project. Half of these people on the screen are from his school. My point is Terrell has met some of these people naturally. T and Brandy are the only two women that Terrell has met online. He met T on a dating app. And he also met Brandy on a dating app. For the first time in Project 7 history, Mr. Carlton was the first person to cheat. In this project specifically, I wanted to ask you, Lola, when Terrell cheated, what do you think what was going through his mind at that time?
I've already shared my thoughts on this situation when I made the first documentary. I think it's very wrong that he did what he did. I understand. He felt like she cheated on him as well. I honestly think no one should be cheating on anyone. If I'm being honest, I think Terrell only did it out of fear of being cheated on. You can't just accuse someone of cheating if you don't have any proof. It's hard to say if he was cheating or not. But I do believe Mr. Carlton won't do it again. Or at the very least, I hope he doesn't. And if I'm being honest, I don't think either of them trusted each other. Terrell knew what he wanted out of the relationship. He wanted to have a long-term relationship with T. I think the trust issues began following each other on Instagram. I think that was the biggest issue that ruined the relationship. I think these days social media ruin the trust of relationships because it's very easy for both men and women to cheat online. It really sucks because of the modern technology, the generation that we live in. In my opinion, it's honestly heartbreaking. But overall, that's what I think of the situation.
I think Mr. Carlton is a very spectacular person, but I also think it's best that he should stay single. It's unknown for how long. Because the problem with relationships these days is that nobody trusts each other. Women don't trust men, and men don't trust women. Trust issues in social media is really just a bad mix. But on the other hand, I don't really think Terrell should give up on relationships entirely. Because I know for a fact that Terrell isn't going to be too much emotionally available. And he's definitely going to be a lot less emotional in his new relationship if he does get one. Because now that Terrell finally experienced heartbreak, he's not going to open up the same way he did the first time. I think the next time when he meets a girl, he's not going to smile as much, not going to laugh as much. He's not going to go out of his way to meet that person as much. Because the truth is, Aaliyah is someone that Terrell misses the most. But at the same time, it was the longest relationship he's ever been in. For years is quite a bit of time. But the reason why he is super heartbroken on the girl that left him last month in 27 days. She left. Terrell has never experienced a woman leaving unexpectedly like that before. And the reason why Terrell cheated is because he has emotional needs as a man. Brandy was that girl that filled in that void that for Mr. Carlton. I'm not saying it was right, but during the time when T was losing interest in Terrell, he gained interest in Brandy, filling that void of loneliness. He was starting to feel the energy between with T didn't quite feel the same as it once did when they met in the earlier stages of time.
The dating world is going to be extremely tough for Mr. Carlton. I really do believe that he should put himself out there more. I don't think that Mr. Carlton should worry about the past. I think he should remain hyper-focused on his goals. Terrell is young and he has time to improve. I do believe that one day he can get married, have a good job and a good career, and hopefully have children one day. There's nothing that he can do about the past. T is gone, and Aaliyah is gone, and Brandy is not coming back either. I think Mr. Carlton should focus on getting himself into the spotlight more, and find new ways to meet people in person, rather than online. Because the same way he can grow is the same way he can grow friendships and build a community of his own. So I wouldn't lose hope just yet. I honestly, in my personal opinion, have faith in Project 7.
You keep mentioning that Terrell should go out more. I somewhat agree with that point of view, but I would argue that Terrell is going to be single, regardless of where he goes within this city of Virginia Beach. Terrell has a car. The maximum distance that he can drive in his vehicle is 5 miles regardless of which direction he's going. If he wants to go any further beyond Chesapeake, he would have to call his assistant person to take him further to different places, even though his assistant may be helping him in certain areas. When it comes to Project 7, there's only a certain amount of places that Mr. Carlton is only allowed to go. So Lola, I do understand your point. But regardless of where Mr. Carlton goes, that it's useless anyway. Mr. Carlton can go anywhere in Virginia Beach. But if he's an introvert and he's not going to communicate with anybody, regardless of where he goes, it would be deemed useless. No matter where Mr. Carlton goes, if he's quiet and he's not communicating with anybody, Project 7 will not work. When you're an introvert like Mr. Carlton, it's very difficult to find a woman that would be interested if she doesn't even know who you are. Yes, women are aware that Mr. Carlton exists. But regardless of where Mr. Carlton goes or where he may end up, no one is going to be interested. Mr. Carlton is the most overlooked character in this city. Mr. Carlton is handsome. I will give him that. But it is useless if no woman wants to talk to him or get to know him. Women won't even give him the stare down. But what seems if he's handsome? Surely you would think somebody would be out there for him. But the problem is Mr. Carlton doesn't know what his problem is. Terrell might not be enough according to society. Women may be attracted to bigger or beefier men. Terrell is underweight and has no muscles. Mr. Carlton has to wear bigger jackets and bigger clothing to appear more attractive. It's just that unfortunately Mr. Carlton struggles to gain weight. It has been his biggest problem for years. And yes, it's true that women like taller men. But skinnier men is an entirely different story.
I disagree. I do believe that there is someone out there for Mr. Carlton. He is tall, handsome, and attractive. It doesn't matter if he's underweight. There are plenty of men that are underweight, and they are in relationships. It is possible for men that are skinny to find love and be married. You're only saying this because things may seem impossible for Mr. Carlton right now. But the sad reality is things are going to be difficult. Mr. Carlton is going to struggle a lot with Project 7. Losing girls like T and Aaliyah is a tough pill to swallow for Mr. Carlton. Relationships take time and work. Mr. Carlton has to work on and communicate more, so that way he can have more opportunities to meet people. We all know that Mr. Carlton can build any friendship with men. He's mostly interested in wanting to talk with women. But if Mr. Carlton wanted more male friends, he would start back his old Project M. But Project M is only designed for him to meet men, so that way those men can help him meet women. In my opinion, I think that would be a very interesting project to start, because I know back in 2023 there was a project in M at the time. I just hope that sometime in the future Mr. Carlton will end up pursuing that project if nothing else works.
I do agree with the idea of Project M. But you do realize that Mr. Carlton has to have male friends to begin with in order to start that project. Terrell doesn't have any male friends. Therefore, there is no way that he can start Project M. There is no man in this world that would want to be interested in wanting to help Mr. Carlton find a relationship. Mr. Carlton lives in a world where men are competing against other men. Terrell is competing in the world full of men. All these men that you see in this world are competing, not only against Terrell, but other men, just so they can try to talk to women. What man on earth would try to help a man get someone else get a woman, and they can't get a woman either? I would argue that it would be better if somebody was a man that was already in a relationship with a woman, would help Mr. Carlton find a woman. That would be a better option. But if a man is single, and if Mr. Carlton is single, that man is not going to help Terrell find a girlfriend. That man is competing against Terrell, so that way he can get a girl as well. Single people keep people single. And that is the sad reality of this whole thing. But the sad truth about Mr. Carlton is that, as far as his love life goes, I believe the story of Project 7 and its pursuit of relationships are set in stone. And what I mean by this is, I think this is the end of the road for Mr. Carlton. No girl is coming into Terrell's life to replace T or Aaliyah. I wholeheartedly believe that Mr. Carlton's singleness is inevitable. And maybe, just maybe, if he does decide to step out of his comfort zone, Hopefully it could change the dynamic of his current situation. I think Terrell's life is like a book that can't be changed. It doesn't matter what he does, or if he tries to come up with a new plan. I truly believe that what he's going through is inevitable. It can't be changed regardless of what he does. He can spend the rest of his life trying to fight this. I just don't believe it'll happen.
I do see your point regarding Project M. And I'm glad that we can somewhat come to an agreement regarding Terrell's pursuit in relationships. In one breath, you say there's hope for Mr. Carlton. But on the other hand, you say, useless. Do you remember when the Avengers was fighting Thanos? And they lost the first time? When the Avengers came back the second time, didn't they say that he was inevitable? But the Avengers defeated him. Basically, my point is with this is, it's okay for someone like Terrell to lose the first time, but hopefully for the second time he can come back and win. My personal opinion, I've always seen Terrell as a winner, always fighting for what he believes in. Mr. Carlton is trying to do this for his friend Trayvon. You can say that to Real. The failure is inevitable. A Project 7 was proven to work. He managed to keep a 4-year relationship for his first relationship, in 27 days for his second relationship. I do believe that Mr. Carlton will be with somebody this year. You say that Terrell's life is like a book that can't be changed, but explain to me how he changes it every time. The only way you can change your book is by being unpredictable. That's what Mr. Carlton is. Unpredictable.
Listen, Lola. I understand that you deeply care about Mr. Carlton. Believe me when I tell you I really want him to succeed in life. Regardless, if he's pursuing a relationship or just anything else in general. But the sad reality that you're missing is that Mr. Carlton isn't all that special. And I know that really hurts to say, but it's true. He has to experience things the hard way, just like any other man in life. The sad reality is that Mr. Carlton exists as a man. Being a man is only half the struggle of Project 7. That's the point that you're missing, Lola. Terrell has to go through these problems just like any other man in this world. Luckily, Mr. Carlton doesn't have to struggle as much compared to most men out there. And luckily he has his perks. He's saving a lot of money. He drives a nice car. He has his own place. And his rent and all of his utilities are quite low. He's living a great life, paying less and saving more. None of this would have ever been possible if he didn't have a disability. Luckily, it's not as bad as most men. He can walk and talk, and also interact with people. But the sad truth about Mr. Carlton's disability is that it's a gift and it's a curse. First, let me tell you why it's a gift. It's a gift because he gets to live an easy lifestyle. He has different types of assistants that can help him with certain goals and tasks. He can go anywhere he wants in the city. He can go out, and he can go to different places. If Mr. Carlton plays his cards right, Project 7 can work in his favor. The problem is he's not using it correctly, nor is he using it accordingly. Now, let me tell you why it's a curse. Ironically, it's actually Project 7. Him having a disability can actually ruin Project 7. Because if you think about it, what woman would want to date a man with a disability? Sure, Mr. Carlton is smarter than most people. I would even argue that he's smarter than most women. But the sad reality is, and the sad truth is, no woman wants a disabled man. Now, Mr. Carlton can try to pretend to act like a regular person. But the sad reality is, he can only do that for so long. When T found out that Mr. Carlton had Asperger's syndrome, Terrell was scared when she found out. He was worried that he will never see her again. I remember him texting her that night. And they went bowling. That was the night when she discovered that Mr. Carlton had Asperger's syndrome. Luckily, they dated for a little while afterwards. But I think that was one of the reasons why she left him. Because I don't think she really wanted to be in a relationship with someone who was disabled. It didn't matter how Mr. Carlton tried to pretend like he was all normal. She never saw him the same after that day. Their entire relationship was different after that point. So now I ask you, Lola, do you think that there is hope left for Mr. Carlton?
Yes, I still believe that there is hope. Regardless of what problem Mr. Carlton may have, there are plenty of people in this world with disabilities that has been married or had a very successful relationships. You gotta stop putting these negative thoughts in Mr. Carlton's head. I don't want him to have to constantly overthink all the time. One thing that you said about Mr. Carlton really interests me. I do agree that Mr. Carlton's lifestyle, it's a little bit easier compared to most men. But if Mr. Carlton really wants to get anywhere, he has to try. You're trying to paint this bad picture of the possibilities of what Mr. Carlton can achieve or what Mr. Carlton can have. Mr. Carlton cannot stay focused with this negative kind of thinking. In my opinion, I believe that Project 7 is a really good idea. And if he has faith in what he believes in, hopefully and eventually it will work out for him. The point that I want to bring up to you is that you should never give up and never stop trying. Project 7 isn't just some project. It's a goal of his that he wants to achieve. But you have to allow him to think freely so that way he can achieve his goals. So that way he doesn't have to think so negatively all the time.
Lola, this is what I need for you to understand. And I want to make this my last argument before this video ends. Most women around Terrell's age are strong, single, independent women that don't need a man. I understand that Mr. Carlton isn't trying to come into a woman's life to help that particular woman with anything. He just wants to be in a relationship and wants to build a connection with a girl. It's easy as that may sound on paper. Trust me when I tell you I honestly really wish that Terrell can succeed in life. You make it seem like I don't want that for him. I'm just trying to tell him the truth. And I know that that's something he doesn't want to hear right now. The first thing that I wanted to bring up is that, in order for Project 7 to work, he needs to step out of his comfort zone, and he needs to do things that make him uncomfortable. That is the only good possible way that I can see him succeeding in Project 7. The truth is he cannot hide behind dating apps forever. And the real reason why Mr. Carlton uses fake names for dating apps is because he doesn't see the value in himself. It doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't like himself. Terrell Carlton is a character that most women aren't interested in. When he creates a new identity like Mike, it gives him more sense of control. Women appreciate men that are strangers. The sad reality is that most women know Terrell, and most of them are not willing to date him. They are willing to date somebody like Mike or Cameron. It's basically Terrell Carlton, but just with a different name. Same age, same profile pictures. Different name, better results. The sad reality is that most women on these dating apps appreciate that more. And most of these women on these dating apps can't seem to hold the conversation these days. The sad reality is most women are not going to spend majority of their time on dating apps. Most women feel like it's a waste of time talking to someone like Mike or Terrell Carlton. The truth is Terrell knows what he wants. But the problem with women in this world is that they don't know what they want. They don't want a guy like Terrell because he's too nice. But since Terrell got his heart broken by T, he's not going to be quite as nice as he was the first time. This means that the relationship with the new girl that he might end up being with might be a lot better than his last relationship. I know that that may be a tough pill to swallow. And I know that that may be hard for you to hear, Lola. That's just the truth. Every good boy got to turn bad at some point. And Mr. Carlton is unfortunately turning into one of those people. It happens to the best of us. And when Terrell turns bad, there's no turning back.
You make it seem like Mr. Carlton has to change, but in reality, he just needs to be himself. It's basically like you said before. He drives a nice car. He has good status and things like that. There's certain things that Terrell has in his life that he can use to his advantage. We need to stop trying to go out of our way to make it seem like Mr. Carlton's life is hopeless. I don't believe that Mr. Carlton is doing anything wrong. I think overall when it comes to Project 7, I think he's doing everything he possibly can. Is it that you need to understand that this all takes time? I do agree that most women these days are complicated. And it is unfortunate that Mr. Carlton is a great guy living in a modern generation where most relationships don't work out due to social media. Even though the hope of Mr. Carlton finding someone special isn't exactly very large. But at the same time, there is still hope for him. I pray that he becomes successful. And I wish him absolutely nothing but the best for him in his life. But one thing that you need to understand, James, is that Project 7 exists for a reason. It's all about Mr. Carlton achieving his goals and finding the love of his life. If his heart is in the right place, I do believe that he can achieve his goals. I understand where you're coming from, James. This is a very tough generation for him to be in, but just because this generation is hard to find love doesn't necessarily mean that Mr. Carlton should give up. We are Mr. Carlton's friends, and we both can agree that we want what's best for him. I think we really hit some valid points in this project, and I'm very excited to dive into episode 3 of this Project 7 documentary series.
I want to thank all of you guys for taking the time and listening to our podcast. Let us know what you guys think of this entire project so far.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Just don't forget to pray for Terrell and wish him the best. See you guys later. Bye.